This is Jason Reed with Inner Edge Music, and I'm very excited to be here with John Wicks from The Records. John, thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah, thank you.
And we had to literally pull you away from the fans because after your show tonight here at the Redwood Bar in Los Angeles, it was quite a show. And I saw a lot of young people out. I would almost say the majority of the people in the audience were the under 30 crowd demographic, which is not a demographic, no offense, but that I would typically think as being the biggest sort of constituency for records fans out there.
No, I mean, we experienced that some years ago when we went up to Portland and Seattle.
Okay.
And it was a similar thing. And I took this show because the guy that was kind of putting it together, Jeff Shibley, was a fan, and I got word from some of the people that I know in the industry that sort of said, like, you really, there's loads of young people coming and they know your stuff. And I played a few backyard shows like that. And again, up in the Northwest as well.
Nice.
And I was just staggered to think that like 20-somethings and whatever, they know the lyrics and they're singing along.
Even some 18-year-olds. I mean, really, a lot of young. And, I've actually been on the lookout for a lot of vintage records, excuse the pun, and not necessarily easy to find for me. I mean, I have a couple. And so given sort of the difficulty at times to get a hold of some of that back catalog, especially in vinyl, is it the sort of modern mediums of distribution like Spotify and streaming and things like that you credit for exposing your music to a younger demographic, or what do you think it is that connects with the young folks?
That's a good question, because I was trying to think about it, because I've built up a mailing list, and the mailing list doesn't really include many of those type of people, so it's like hard to sort of harness that fan base. But I mean, if we could do more shows, like for instance with Dave Philp, like band, and who we were around at the same time. He was one of the first to sign to like the American band to Virgin.
We talked to him a little bit earlier, and he was really excited about tonight. Well, speaking of all the other exciting things that are going on, John, there are in fact a lot of exciting things. And we have a fan right there bringing our record, your record that we were talking about. Definitely. But a lot of exciting things going on in terms of, there's the wonderful classics records song and your solo stuff in your back catalog. But tonight we witnessed you playing some of your more contemporary work from the last decade and things like that. And the audience responded really well.
Considering they don't know, it was like there's still, I think, mileage in it, because a lot of people have never heard it.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's like they've got to grow on them. And That Girl Is Emily, the one about Syd Barrett, it's got a sister song called So Close to Home about Peter Green, who I met. And I've given the disc to Peter Green and also to Mick Fleetwood. And then when I met, I was at the Tom Petty Music Airs thing in February 10th. And I was talking to Stevie Nicks, and she knew who I was, because obviously I'd given all these things to like Mick Fleetwood, and it was like, I know you.
That's a big deal, isn't it? When she says that
you do, I'm like thinking, really, and I guess she knows me from that, because I've like written these songs about Peter Green, and they're dear to, obviously Peter was dear to everybody's heart, because he started the band in the first place, and then of course they morphed into what they morphed into. But I've loved them all the way through.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So
Well, speaking of the song that you just mentioned, I really liked it. That Girl Is Emily. And is that a reference to Syd Barrett's See Emily Play?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What it was is when I was back in England, I was kind of like going through a real bad patch, like with a sort of an emotional breakdown.
Oh, wow.
And the first idea I got was the So Close to Home, which is we didn't play tonight, but it's like a sister song. And I had the idea for it as a concept about Peter Green, because he lived not too far away from where I live. And I was living in Surrey, and he was in Richmond, and I was in Thames Ditton. And I'd see him walking through the streets, and he's like hobbling along, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really sad. Like a great, this genius guitarist and great songwriter and singer. And so I just thought, on a crazy day one day, I thought, maybe I'll just look through the phone book, maybe, because I knew where he lived, 7 Albany Terrace or something in Richmond. And And so I looked through the phone book, and there his name was, and his full name is Peter Greenbaum.
Yeah.
And I knew that, so I thought, oh my God, I got to call him. And I was trying to. It was a sort of misguided attempt at trying to help him because I knew he got the schizophrenia from the LSD trip, and so I called him, and he picked up the phone, and it was, you couldn't mistake the voice. It was like, and of course when I started talking, I was trying to talk to him, and we got a little bit into it, and he went, "Who is this?" And then he hung up on me. And so
you felt like a little bit of a stalker there. Your intentions were good, but you were trying to,
And of course he didn't know that, and so I called him back again. And then again, it's sort of like, I started to say, "Well, Peter, look, I was just trying. Who is this?" And then he just hung up again. I thought, oh, what? And then years later, when I came over here, he was playing the State Theatre in Falls Church, Virginia, and I lived in that area at the time. And I couldn't see him because it was sold out. And so I went there trying to see. I've got the recording of this song that I wrote about him because I'd read it in the tabloids about what a mess he was. And so I thought, wow, what a shame, And I just thought, because I was in a mess, it was like so close to home because we lived 5 miles away from each other, and it was like the mental thing and everything. It was just so close to home, and where we, the distance between us, and so I got this like CDR of it. I hadn't like got it on a record yet, and I went to the State Theatre hoping that I could sort of maybe get in, and I couldn't, and so I thought maybe I can give it to someone, and then I went out in a car park, and all of a sudden a car arrived and a bunch of people spilled out of it, and one of them was him, and he starts walking over, so I call him. And I go, "Hey," and he go into the stage door, and his buddies were kind of like, "What's this?"
Who is this guy?
And then when I started talking to him, and he was all right about it, it was like they just carried on walking. And I said, "Peter, I got something for you." And he said, "Oh, something for me?" Well, nobody gives me anything, And it was like talking to a little kid, because he got the schizophrenia.
Yeah. So you were actually able to present to Peter the CDR.
The CDR, yeah.
Wow.
And then later it got used in a unauthorized Fleetwood Mac thing that was done by Passport Productions, and it didn't feature the back, but it was a whole documentary about them, and I guess that they knew about that, and then I'd already met when Mick Fleetwood had a business called Fleetwood's in Alexandria, Virginia. I got to talk to him for hours there, like one time, and we were just talking about different things, and so we kind of bonded on that.
Well, John, those are some really interesting stories, and I know you're an artist that has really, you've been through a lot, sort of personally. I know, struggles with cancer and things like that. And I heard through a little birdie told me recently that you have been doing some studio recording of material, and that there's a new single coming out soon called "Chasing Angels," which is a tribute in essence to the late and great Phil Brown. So that yet another tip of the hat to another artist that you really respect, obviously.
Yeah. And that was written in 2012 when he died. He'd suffered from Parkinson's disease for a long time, and he was living in England, and we were still in touch. And I'd send things when I could, to make it, and it made him happy. And I just thought, I've got to write a song about him. And he was like a real heartthrob in the band. And I just thought, if there's a parallel universe or universes, and he's there somewhere. I just had this pic because I'm really into the whole astronomy thing. I've been watching so all the ancient aliens, all that stuff. I'm a sucker for that.
So you think that music that you put out into the multiverse may somehow reach his ears in another parallel dimension?
Somehow I feel it does because it came together really fast, and I just thought, wow, I'm onto something. This is a really great song, really befitting the respect that I hold for him. And when we were recording it, like strange things were happening with on the computer, where it was all like, and the actual production team, like Ed Donnelly, who's doing the engineering, sort of said like strange thing happened, like I've never seen before, like all the stuff got kept moving around without anybody doing anything to it.
So you think it may have been potentially the spirit of Phil
The
out in the
people
universe
that
having an
people
influence?
that I've known him longer than me have said that when they were at the funeral, stuff like that happened. So it's like, I mean, I don't know about an afterlife. None of us do, but I suspect some energy was like going on
Well,
there.
you were obviously so close to Phil through the years and knew him really well. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a strong connection between the two of you. Well, John, another question. Through your many years, your many decades of accomplishments, I wanted to ask you, what's probably the biggest thing that stands out in terms of musical performance? I know, 2 years ago, 2015, the wonderful benefit that occurred locally.
Yeah.
Was that one of the highlights? I mean, that one, the Bangles, the Muffs, the Peter Case, Power Pop Extravaganza.
I was kind of like blown away on so many levels because like it wasn't long, maybe 3 months before that, I was crippled. I couldn't walk. I couldn't get out.
Incapacitated, yes.
It changes you. I mean, there's no denying. I don't think that it really humbled me as much as just made, because I'm kind of cynical about life and the world, not just from my perspective, but what goes on in it, and the inequities and the unfairness and stuff, that people are born victims of circumstances way worse off than ever I am. And I have a job as an idealistic person dealing with that. It's like John Lennon writing Imagine. It's a great idea and it's a beautiful song, but I wrote a song called Desert Sky about the whole Middle East thing. And I know it's only idealistic because it's never going to happen. I can't ever see, when are we going to be living like, because then you can sort of think, well, at least I could be sick in a world where you go out and you don't see all these atrocities, and it's idealistic, really.
Like John Lennon, and you've referenced the Beatles' influence and all the Liverpool song today.
Yeah.
You're another dreamer like John Lennon. I think, and the world needs dreamers. So,
totally, yeah.
John, one last question, and thank you for your time. And you've got a lot of fans out here wanting to talk to you, so I really appreciate it. A question that we like to ask artists when we interview them is. A question about your early influences, and more specifically, what was the very first record or 7-inch single, 45, that you purchased, presumably when you were a young boy, I assume? Do you remember that early influence?
There was an artist in England called Adam Faith, and his real name was Terry Nellum, and he was pretty big, I guess, late 50s, early 60s, maybe early 60s, and he had a song called What Do You Want? I don't know who wrote it. I don't think he wrote it. And I just was besotted by that record, so I had to go buy the 7-inch. That's one of the first records I bought,
And then after that, what kind of stuff did you jumped into some other... Rolling Stones, is that...
Actually, I was one of those people that... I was a closet Beatles fan, obviously, because how could you not be? But I kind of liked the starts of the Rolling Stones because I was so besotted by Brian Jones. We shared the same birthday, February 28th. And I wanted to so look like him. I spent my youth trying to see why can't I get my hair like him, And I actually got to see him one time. He pulled up in a car just before he died, and I didn't know it was him. And he was sitting in the passenger seat. It was in England. He had this big floppy hat on. He's sitting in the front of this car, and it was one of those quirky roads like in England where Sonning it was, where he lived, where he had that house where he died, and they were on their way back. Someone was driving him, and it's one of those roads that's it's got a bridge over a stream, and you can only go one way, so the traffic has to stop, like stoplight, and then one goes green, and then you can go that way, and then the other one stops, and the other one can come over. And he was sitting there, and I didn't realize it was him. And I'm selling newspapers with a friend of mine. We're only 15, 16, that much. And so we're looking at him, like kids are, and we're thinking it's like some old granny, we're young and they're old. And it's look at that granny. And all of a sudden he turned round, and I just thought, oh my God, it's Brian Jones. I thought, and I'm just thinking, he's my idol in the Rolling Stones, and I just probably sent him over the edge by laughing at. And he just kind of looked round and turned around and just flipped his hair under the hat, and then the light changed and he drove off. And I never got over that. I mean, I didn't mean it. It was like being a mean kid, you know.
You were a young boy. Yeah, kids say things.
Yeah.
Well, John, thanks again for your time. And again, want to plug some exciting things for fans out there of John Wicks and the records. Some new material. Fans can expect some new
Yes,
material
yeah.
here soon. And
Slowly but surely. It takes a long time, but because I'm a perfectionist, I got to get it, you know, really right, you know.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure whatever comes out, it will in fact be pretty close to perfection, knowing your musical aesthetics.
Yes.
And we wish you all the best, John. And for fans,
Jason Angels,
yeah,
pretty
and
soon.
fans out there, definitely a lot more to come from this gentleman. And we'll be looking forward to
Thank
it.
you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so
I
much,
hope I
John.
can stick around. Thanks a lot, Jason. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.